I tend to look at this almost the reverse that a legalist would look at it. They would say, here's our list of things which we are not to do in order to be right with God. And if we do them, we should feel pretty guilty. And instead, I see it as exactly saying that these are the things. If you see evidence in somebody's life, it's quite likely that they're not saved, because this is sort of like, how do you test whether or not somebody has the Spirit or not? And these are the negative form of that.
They're the fruits of the flesh.
Right.
I think might be a great way to think about it. If you're in the flesh, that's what's going to come out. It's not a list of things. If I do these things that I'm saved, it's this. If I'm in the flesh, this is what happens. The
right.
inside-out aspect of it, of both the flesh and the fruit of the Spirit.
And that's contrasted, of course, as we get into now with the fruit of the Spirit.
Awesome. I can't take any more of this negativity. I need to go walk around outside. Galatians chapter 5, verse 22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness. Now we spent quite a bit of time looking at the various negatives of the fruits of the flesh. Now Paul shifts gears here to look at the positives of the fruits of the Spirit. Let's break down, as we did for the negatives, let's break down the positives here. Love. The word here used for love is the word agape. Now there are three words used in biblical terms for the one word we use these days in English for love. The word, as I said here, the word here agape, it's an other-centered love. And agape means love in modern-day Greek, such as in the term sagapeo, which means I love you. Now, in ancient Greek, it often refers to a general affection or deeper sense of true love, rather than the attraction suggested by another one of the other words for love, which is eros. And it's different still than what's often called brotherly love, which is phileo or phileos. Now, agape is used in the biblical passages known as the love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13, and is described here, there, and throughout the New Testament as really kind of a sacrificial love. It's an other-centered love, and really a love that comes from God. Originally, agape was sort of a throwaway word that the New Testament writers kind of co-opted and put a whole new spin on. Joy is the next word here. And in the Pauline corpus of letters, we have, for Paul, chara is the joy of faith, as we see in Philippians 1, verse 25, and a fruit of the Spirit here in Galatians chapter 5. We see that it's used to describe God's kingdom as joyful or joy in Romans 14, verse 17. Joy and hope are related. We also see from Romans 12:12. Its opposite is affliction. We see again from the book of Romans, chapter 5, verse 1. We also see that joy actualizes freedom and takes shape, interestingly, in fellowship, again there in Romans. Paul wants to come with joy to different people. We also see that in Philippians, joy is reciprocal in Philippians 2, 28 and 29. We also see that joy is in God in 1 Thessalonians chapter 3, or in the Lord, and especially in the Lord in Philippians chapter 3, verse 1. In the relation between Paul and the church, joy is eschatological. The church will be his joy in 1 Thessalonians 2. The mood of the Philippians even is one of joy, as we see there in chapter 1, verse 4. We see that this is joy. There is joy at the preaching of Christ even in Philippians. And it's future joy experienced as joy in the present in Philippians chapter 4. As the joy of faith, it includes a readiness for martyrdom, which I thought was interesting. Again in Philippians chapter 1, verse 25. It's also important to note that this joy has the sense of straining beyond itself, which is perhaps why Paul places such an emphasis on fellowship and joy being so closely linked together here. Peace. The Greek concept of irony here irony. And I don't mean irony like I-R-O-N-Y. It's E-I-R-E-N-E if you were going to transliterate it. For the Greeks, irony primarily denotes a state and not necessarily a relationship or attitude. The main meaning in the New Testament is obviously not the Greek one, but salvation in a deeper sense.
And this is for peace?
For peace, yep. Thank you. This embraces human concord, as in Acts 7, but also peace with God. Closer to the Greek are the uses for the opposite of war, in Acts 12 and 24, also in Matthew 10, and also in Paul's use for peace of soul as the opposite of war with God, a really reconciliation there. The Old Testament basis comes out plainly in such expressions as making peace in James 3:18 and giving a greeting of peace in the Gospel of John 14, verse 27. The next word is patience. The word macrothumia. Macrothumia is the Greek word translated as patience. It also is sometimes translated endurance as well. It appears that God's long-suffering, as mentioned in Romans, applies here as well, especially to verse 22, in that since God is long-suffering and patient, He, through the Spirit, gives us that same long-suffering spirit. Now, this is not necessarily a passive kind of patience, but more like the ability to endure hardships for the sake of God's kingdom. Kindness. The biblical word here is Christotes. It's also translated as good about 25% of the time in the New Testament. God is quote-unquote kind even to the ungrateful and selfish in Luke 6:35. He seeks and saves the lost in Luke 15. The fullness of the divine kindness also lies behind the statement of Jesus that His yoke is easy and light in Matthew 11. As Paul sees it, kindness constantly characterizes God, but this kindness finds particular expression and completion in His saving work in and through Christ. The continuity of God's kindness may also be seen in 1 Peter 2:3, which applies Psalm 34:8 to Christ. You have tasted the kindness of the Lord. Goodness. The word here for goodness is a compound word, agathos. As both adjective and noun, agathos denotes excellence. As an adjective, it is given specific content by the word it qualifies. The basic approach is again religious. Only God is truly good. His goodness is the kindness which through Christ confers the quote-unquote good things of salvation. Apostles are thus seen preachers of the good news, such as in Romans 10 and Isaiah, even a foreshadowing of Isaiah 52. Rightly, Matthew sees that God's exclusive goodness does not rule out Christ's sinlessness. We also see that nothing in this world deserves to be called good. The law is good, but even through the law, sin works death. Distinctions can be made between good and bad people, or speaking good and being evil. Interestingly, I thought this was interesting, government can also be called a servant for good, yet these distinctions are only relative before God. So God is always the thing that's defining the goodness. And I will leave it there, because I could go on for hours about goodness.
Okay. Well, I kind of jumped right to verse 23, which reads and finishes it off saying, meekness, temperance, against such there is no law. So basically, these things, this list of fruits of the Spirit, these are gifts that we receive from God as a result of our filling with the Spirit. These are things that are not natural to our natural human nature. They are gifts. They are a result of receiving the Spirit. So when your heart is being changed, you will notice these things developing more and more. It also means that when you see the opposite of these things happening, you will know that it's not of the Spirit. And you also will know that it can be overcome because you can have the Spirit, and if that's the opposite, then it can overpower it, obviously. An example of that would be like people that would say, well, I have a bad temper. It's just the way that I am. But it doesn't have to be that way, because the fruit of the Spirit, one of them is long-suffering, or the ability not to have a short temper, basically. So I think that we sometimes settle a little bit too much on those things reading this list of fruits of the Spirit. That's all I have for that.